So as I'm recording this, the big political story of the moment is who Kamala Harris will select as her vice presidential running mate. It's slated to happen any day now, and somehow during this very unprecedented election cycle after Biden stepped aside and Harris becomes the presumptive nominee, we've kind of slipped into a couple weeks of pretty familiar Veepstakes, the speculation about who the presidential candidate will pick as their running mate. And it kind of feels weirdly normal, right? All the various governors being floated, the scuttlebutt about who would provide an edge in what state. There's actually a pretty long history of this, at least in modern political history. So much so that earlier this year in our podcast, This Day in Esoteric Political History, we did a special series all about the Veepstakes. You should go check that out. We reran one of those episodes today. In that series, by the way, I learned that the term Veepstakes really took off in the mid-'80s into the '90s. 1984 had a lot of speculation, and 1992 may have been the most Veepstakey of Veepstakey elections we've ever had. But I'll tell you a couple things I learned from that series that I've been thinking about as I watch this 2024 mini Veepstakes play out. One, it is kind of shocking how not vetted so many of the vice presidential picks have been over the years. Inevitably, the nominee makes this pick, and then a couple weeks later, news stories start to trickle out from that person's past. People dig up stories from their home state, and it's like, whoa, how did you not know this about the person you just added to the ticket? And obviously, I think we're seeing a little bit of that right now with the GOP, perhaps a little buyer's remorse with J.D. Vance. And I'm curious what kind of vetting is going on the Democratic side, especially since this is all coming together even faster than usual. Related to that, I've been thinking about a second thing, which is something that my co-host Nicole Hemmer said, which is that this really is the first big test of a presidential candidate's leadership and management style. Running for president, I've said this a million times, running for president is so different from the job of being president. But selecting a VP does involve a lot of the kinds of things that I do think matter in terms of being a good president. Who do you trust? How do you surround yourself with people who will compliment you as you make decisions, who will tell you when they think you're wrong? So I don't know if the VP pick itself makes a difference, but the process by which the selection is made is a nice indication of the potential president's management style. And once you get into office, it is a managerial position after all. So there is something to be said for how the process plays out. Okay, I said there were two things, but there's one last thing. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. Listeners to the show who heard the series that we did on the Veepstakes know that I really did it as an excuse to talk about the story of the Alaskan cruise ship rides where the GOP brain trust fell in love with Sarah Palin. I just love that story. You should go track it down. It is a perfect little moment in esoteric political history. A bunch of writers from like the Weekly Standard and the National Review fly to Alaska. They go on these cruise ships. They fall in love with Sarah Palin. They come back to DC. Eventually, they convince John McCain to pick her. Obviously, it backfires in a big way. It is quite the story. But it does also relate to something that I think we're seeing play out here in 2024, even over the last couple of weeks, which is that with these VP picks, with this Veepstakes, you see the brain trust of a party, often a pretty small group, kind of fall in love with someone. And then just a little bit later, you're like, wait, what were they thinking? How did they fall in love with this person? Again, J.D. Vance comes to mind, but I'm watching on the Democratic side, all these people around the country fall head over heels for these governors whose name they probably didn't even know a couple weeks ago. And part of me wonders, let's see how this all plays out. All right, that is enough for me. I'm curious what you are making of this Veepstakes moment. Let us know, and I will see you in the podcast feed very soon.